Hi there, here's a quick way you can take some analytics using EZPZ Interaction Toolkit. So you're going to need to have a Firebase real-time database set up. I won't really get into how to set that up. You can just look up how to do that. But this video will show you how you can use a Firebase real-time database with EZPZ Toolkit to get some analytics. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get a scene data rig prefab. And this prefab is just located here in the database folder. And what you need to do is you just need to drag that into your scene. I already have one here set up, but for demonstration purposes, if I were to delete that and pretend that it wasn't there already, I can just go drag it from the prefabs folder. Okay, the next thing to do is go straight to the Firebase bridge, and we need to update this link to whatever link that we have over here. I'm just going to copy this and then put this onto here. And after that, we want to tick this box so we're actually able to post to the database. And now we're pretty much ready to tag all of these buttons over here, basically any EZPZ interactable component. So if we say we wanted to track the number of clicks that people have for this button here, what we can do is we can add a new event. So you can see that this was previously connected to the previous scene data rig object, but it got disconnected when I deleted it. So let's just pretend that wasn't there. And then let's go ahead and add a new event. So if I wanted to tell the database to track this click, I would go to the scene data manager and then talk to the scene data manager. And then I can just say add event. And you can see that this add event function is just something that takes a string. And you can just use any string that means something to you. So I guess in this case, I'm going to literally say means something to me. And that way, I know that if there is something like this in the event log, the user has actually clicked it. So what does the scene data manager do? Essentially, the scene data manager is our local interface within the scene to the Firebase bridge object here. And then the job of this guy is basically just to talk to the Firebase bridge. It's just a convenient thing. So what you would do is you would get all the objects that you wanted to track events to talk to the scene data manager using the add event, and then it'll automatically talk to the Firebase bridge, which then talks to this. Now I'm just going to take back some of the screen real estate here so I can explain a little bit better. So this button is reporting an event to the scene data manager, and then the scene data manager's job is just to talk to this Firebase thing over here, and this is where we're going to see these events. So let's just go press play. And then when the user clicks here, we can see these events come up. So these numbers here is just essentially the timestamp, the number of seconds that has passed since the beginning of the session. And then if we wanted to report it to the database, because right now this is all local information, what we need to do is we need to go press a post data event. So I remember that I did disconnect this by deleting the original object. So let's relink this again, post data. So what we need to do is just add a new event over here, talk to the scene data manager, and then instead of adding an event, we can post to the database. Or actually, it might be a good idea just to add an event here so we know that this came from this button. So post data button. And you can probably come up with much better messages than this, but this is just show you that you can just put anything you want, whatever makes sense to you. So now we want to post this data to the database. So let's add another command in the event. We're still talking to the scene data manager, but now we want to post to database. So post to database like that. And have a look at what happened. So let's go back to Firebase. Let's go back to our game and keep an eye out on the window on the left to see what happens. Whoa! So now we can see that it's essentially just posted all these events to this database. Now I know that was a very crude example, but if you're just to strategically place these event messages around your prototype, you can build a very good picture of what the user was actually doing in that session. So for example, this message would have only come if the user clicked this button because that's what I put in here. So I know that the user has clicked it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And because I know that this is the number of seconds from the beginning of the session, I know that the user has actually clicked it for a little bit. That is, they clicked this button in quick succession over around 3 seconds, and then they waited around 10 seconds and then clicked it twice more. And since this is the last button that they clicked immediately before the database received this data, I can tell that the user spent around 3 minutes playing around with my prototype. So that's 180 seconds divided by 60, and 60 seconds being a minute, so we end up with about 3 minutes. I'll just talk a little bit more about what these little doodads mean. So this string over here is just something that you can use to differentiate between different sessions, and this is listed as a prefix, and we can just rewrite this as prefix because it is a prefix. And although this is saying participant ID, you can essentially treat this as a suffix. And participant ID over here is blank because the participant ID in here is blank. So you have the option to tweak that a little bit if your study design is a little bit more stringent or a little bit more rigorous. But if you don't expect too many people to be doing your experiment or to be playing your prototype, and especially if you don't think that they'll be doing it simultaneously, it should be okay for you not to worry about that. You can just assume that every single one of these lines is a different session. But just to demonstrate what I mean by that, we've now changed these settings over here. Let's go ahead and post another set of data. Boop. So we can see that it's made another post, but now using the new settings that we've put up. And then if we open up the event log, we pretty much have exactly the same data. And then if we have a look at the top string here, it is now matching what we've put up for the prefix and the suffix. And the deal is, if those match exactly and you post new data, it'll just update. So if you just do this, this, this. So if you set up your scene in a certain way, you can actually see live data coming in. So hopefully that's enough for you to get started. I won't hold your hand too much on how to set up a real-time database. There's lots of documentation out there already, but essentially if you just go to firebase.com, sign up, create a project, and then set up a real-time database. And then once you have that, you'll be able to grab this link and then paste that into the EZPZ Toolkit Firebase bridge right here. And then you're ready. There is one more thing. You need to set up your access rules to be this. So you always want this to be false because you don't want people to be reading your data that you've gathered from your users. But you do want this to be true because you want to be able to write into it. And this is a little bit risky because if someone knows your address, people can write gibberish into your database and it's going to be all messy, but at least they won't be able to overwrite the data that you've added yourself because these strings are unique. And no one's going to know this address anyway, right? So I would say this is for people who are a little bit more advanced. Only do this if you're already comfortable doing this kind of stuff. Or if you want to learn, it's well worth your time doing so. But you'll have to make your own investigations. This video was just a bit of a quick gateway type introduction, not a detailed guide. Good luck!